The alarms didn't come from satellites, warships, or hidden orbital arrays. They came from a centuries-old museum piece, a rusting communications dish at the edge of what used to be Nevada. The dish had been inactive for 998 years, long forgotten beneath sand, storms, and half-collapsed structures. But at precisely 3:14 Earth Standard Time, it began to hum. Lights that hadn't glowed since the collapse of the old world flickered with stubborn defiance. Static surged across dusty monitors. And through the dead night, a signal whispered across the planet, unmistakable, alien, and most importantly, hostile. Commander Ray Halvorson was the first to laugh. She was a soldier by necessity, not by heritage. In truth, she considered herself more a farmer than a warrior. Her hands still bore the permanent scars from welding irrigation pipes in the settlement of New Carthage. Yet when the alarm spread across the planetary grid, her reaction was immediate, a sharp bark of laughter, echoing in the war room, as if the whole thing was some ancient prank. "Aliens," she said aloud, shaking her head. "1,000 years of silence, and this is how they say hello?" Around her, the council stared as if she'd cracked under pressure. But the truth was simpler. Humanity had been waiting. Not in fear, not in paranoia, but in anticipation. Every storyteller, every historian, every soldier born after the collapse knew it was only a matter of time before someone out there remembered Earth existed. The only question was whether they'd come bearing olive branches or blades. The blade had finally come. Dr. Elias Yates leaned closer to the screen, eyes gleaming under wire spectacles that were older than most cities. He was one of the last historians who actually specialized in pre-collapse alien encounters, a job most had considered obsolete until 5 minutes ago. His voice trembled, not with fear but excitement. "It's them. The Raath. Their linguistic markers are identical to the transmissions from the pre-exile era. They warned they would return." "Warned?" Ray cocked an eyebrow. "Or promised?" The old man chuckled, stroking his long, gray beard. "Both, I suspect. They called us a feral species. They believed they'd given us mercy when they abandoned our world. To them, we were children, dangerous children, locked away on one planet so we couldn't set fire to the stars." A ripple of low laughter went through the chamber. Dangerous children. That phrase had been passed down across centuries, whispered at campfires and woven into music. It had never felt like an insult. If anything, it was a point of pride. Humanity had survived because it refused to kneel. Now, it seemed, the Raath wanted to test that reputation again. The hologram shifted, revealing a grainy projection of what the signal truly carried, a fleet. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of warships, their outlines jagged like obsidian teeth. The data wasn't perfect. Time and decay had rendered the old receiver slow, but the intent was clear. They weren't coming to talk. "They'll hit us in less than 72 hours, Yates whispered. "An entire war host. They'll expect us to kneel, same as before. They'll think we've grown weaker in our exile." That was when Ray laughed again, louder this time, the sound almost manic. She couldn't help it. Because if the Raath truly believed that, then they had already lost. "Should we warn the colonies?" asked Lieutenant Merrick, a wiry man with sharp eyes who'd been Ray's second for over a decade. "Warn them?" Ray smirked. "No. We'll invite them to the party." The chamber filled with murmurs. Most of the council members were uneasy, but none objected. They had all grown up on the same stories. Humanity's stubborn streak was as much a cultural backbone as agriculture or song. Fear of extinction had long since burned away. Instead of panic, the news spread like wildfire across settlements, spaceports, orbital rings, and mining colonies. Messages carried not despair, but humor. Farmers painted, "Welcome back," on silos. Dockworkers brewed stronger ale. Children scribbled alien warships on classroom walls with captions like "Free Target Practice." Humanity's collective response was not terror, but laughter. Yet beneath the jokes, preparations began in earnest. Humanity's 1,000-year silence had not been idle. On the shipyards of Titan, war barges that had masqueraded as cargo haulers were armed with hidden rail cannons. In the orbital stations above Mars, retired miners fitted their drills with plasma tips sharp enough to carve through ally hulls. Even the pilgrims of Europa, long sworn to peace, unsealed vaults of experimental drones. The Raath thought Earth was a graveyard. What they would find instead was a fortress. Ray stood at the balcony of New Carthage's central spire, gazing over the city. From here, she could see the lights of reactors blooming awake, arming grids, and blacksmiths hammering alloys into weapons. The air hummed with anticipation. She let it wash over her like music. "You don't look nervous," Merrick observed, stepping beside her. "Should I?" He frowned. "This is a full fleet. By old records, they outnumber us 100 to 1. Their weapons make ours look primitive. Their hulls—" Ray cut him off with a grin. "Outnumbered, outgunned, outdated. Haven't we heard this before? Every invader has said the same thing. And where are they now?" Merrick didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ruins of old Earth bore silent testimony. Humanity had been underestimated too many times. Behind them, Elias Yates cleared his throat. "Commander, if I may, there is something more." He held up an ancient data pad, its screen cracked but still functional. "The Raath Doctrine. Their psychology. They don't simply conquer. They humiliate. They need submission. When they arrive, they will demand ceremony. Kneeling. Bowing. Symbols of surrender. It is a cultural obsession." "Good," Ray said. "That means we'll have their attention when we refuse." Yates hesitated. "It also means they will not hold back. If we mock them openly, they will scorch this planet to ash." For a long moment, Ray said nothing. Then she smirked. "Then we'd better make sure they remember that humans laugh hardest when the fire's at their feet." Word spread quickly that the Raath would demand humanity's submission upon arrival. And in typical human fashion, settlements began planning their own response. Some designed banners that read "No thanks." Others rehearsed songs, irreverent, mocking, joyful songs. One colony even began scripting a full comedy performance, to be broadcast directly at the alien fleet. When the invaders arrived, they would not find fear. They would find the punchline to 1,000 years of waiting. The first contact didn't happen in orbit, but in the desert where the old Nevada dish still stood. The Raath ship appeared without warning, a sleek obsidian craft that blotted out the stars. It lowered on a column of blue fire, sending dust storms spiraling into the night. From its belly descended towering figures, the Raath. Tall, armored, their mandibles clicking with disdain. Their leader strode forward, his voice a guttural snarl amplified by translation drones. "Kneel," he commanded. "A millennium has passed, and still you exist only by our mercy. Kneel, and you may live. Refuse, and you will burn." For a heartbeat, silence ruled the desert. Then, from behind the barricades came the sound of laughter. First Ray, sharp and fearless. Then Merrick. Then the settlers. The sound grew until it rolled across the desert like thunder. Some clutched their sides. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The Raath shifted uneasily, unused to such defiance. Their leader snarled again, confused. "Do you not understand? We will annihilate you." Ray stepped forward, her shadow long in the desert light. Her grin was almost feral. "Oh, we understand perfectly. But after waiting 1,000 years for you to crawl back here, this is all you've brought? This is your grand return? Forgive me if I don't bow, I'm too busy laughing." The Raath bristled, weapons humming to life. Humanity's silence was over. And it had begun with laughter. The Raath didn't understand laughter. To them, the sound wasn't joy, or defiance, or camaraderie. It was madness. Insanity. They were a species bred for order, hierarchy, obedience to strength. To mock strength was to spit in the face of survival. Yet here were humans, unarmed, surrounded by warships, and their answer to annihilation was laughter. The Raath commander's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Silence them," he hissed. His guards stepped forward, weapons raised. But before they could fire, the desert roared, not with alien cannons, but with human ingenuity. The ancient dish, forgotten for 1,000 years, suddenly blazed with power. Coils hidden beneath the sands lit like suns. A pulse of electromagnetic fury ripped across the landing zone. The Raath weapons sparked, fizzled, and died. Their translation drones crashed to the ground, smoking. Even the commander's armor flickered, systems shorting. And through it all, humanity kept laughing. Ray shouted over the storm. "You should have done your homework. 1,000 years of silence wasn't wasted. We've been preparing for you." The humans opened fire. Not with sleek plasma rifles or precision railguns, those were reserved for the fleets above, but with repurposed mining equipment, converted industrial lasers, and kinetic hammers that had once driven supports into rock. Crude, perhaps, compared to alien sophistication. But the Raath had no idea that humanity's greatest weapon was never technology. It was improvisation. One guard fell, then another. The Raath commander staggered backward, his armor hissing. He raised a claw and barked into his comms, and above them the obsidian warship howled in fury, unleashing fire down upon the desert. The humans scattered. Explosions turned sand into glass. The dish shattered, collapsing into molten ruin. Yet Ray and her people didn't falter. They'd expected retaliation. Merrick grabbed Ray's arm as they ran. "That ship will vaporize us in seconds." "Good," Ray said between breaths. "Then they'll think we're the easy prey they wanted. And when they come for the rest of the colonies, they'll get the real welcome." The Raath fleet didn't delay. Within hours, their armada spread across Earth's skies, blotting out constellations. Cities shook under sonic booms. Oceans frothed as their landing crafts plunged into the waves. For the first time in a millennium, Earth was under siege. And humanity laughed harder. On Titan, when the first Raath ships breached the atmosphere, miners activated what looked like cargo haulers. The vessels rose, unassuming, until their panels split open to reveal massive rail cannons disguised within. The first volley shredded a Raath destroyer in half, the explosion lighting Titan's methane skies. Workers cheered as if at a festival. One even raised a mug of beer to the flaming wreckage. On Europa, the pacifist pilgrims released swarms of drones, tiny, insect-like machines that buzzed through the alien fleet, attaching themselves to hulls. The Raath mocked them at first, until the drones detonated in perfect sequence, ripping holes in their formation. The Europa choir, watching from their domes beneath the ice, sang hymns louder than the explosions. Even on Mars, where supplies were scarce and morale often thin, workers sabotaged landing crafts by luring them into abandoned mines lined with explosives. The tunnels collapsed, burying entire squads alive. Survivors of Mars' harsh deserts laughed over radios, mocking the invaders who had been bested by simple traps. But the Raath weren't fools. If humanity's first trick was improvisation, theirs was adaptation. And quickly, they began to understand. Humans weren't fighting for survival in the traditional sense. They were fighting to humiliate their enemies, to deny the Raath the one thing they craved most: submission. The Raath commander, who had landed in Nevada, scarred but still alive, addressed his fleet. "They resist not with strength, but with insolence. Break their spirit. Burn their monuments. Kill their children before their eyes if you must. Only then will they bow." So began the escalation. They targeted New Carthage first, the settlement Ray called home. Swarms of ships descended, their weapons lashing out at water supplies, energy grids, and housing domes. Civilians fled underground as buildings collapsed. Yet when the Raath breached the central spire, expecting terrified humans huddled in the dark, they found something else. Projectors blazed to life, broadcasting not pleas for mercy, but comedy. Holograms danced across the rubble, caricatures of Raath warriors with oversized mandibles, slipping on banana peels, tripping over their own weapons, mocked by laughing children. The Raath opened fire in rage, blasting the projections to dust. But more appeared. And more. The humans had wired the entire city to become a theater of mockery. Even as the real civilians fought tooth and nail, their shadows laughed and laughed, a chorus that drove the Raath into madness. Merrick stood beside Ray in the tunnels, watching the chaos unfold on their monitors. "They're furious," he said, half in awe. "That's the point," Ray replied. "Fury makes you sloppy." Sloppy indeed. The Raath began lashing out without strategy, firing on decoys, chasing false signals, wasting ammunition on holograms while hidden artillery ripped holes in their ranks. But there was a cost. For every victory, humanity lost lives. Colonies burned. Ships shattered. Even Ray, for all her bravado, felt the weight. In the quiet between battles, she found herself staring at casualty reports, her laughter fading. Yates, the historian, noticed her silence. He approached one evening, his hands folded behind his back. "You fear we cannot sustain this, don't you?" Ray didn't look up from the reports. "They outnumber us. Outgun us. And every hour we lose more. How long before the laughter dies?" The old man smiled sadly. "You misunderstand. Laughter is not the absence of fear. It is its defiance. Even if every settlement falls, even if every ship burns, as long as one human laughs in their face, we have already won." Ray let his words sink in. Slowly she nodded. Then she tore the reports in half. Numbers could wait. Morale could not. The next day, she broadcast a message across the system, not to strategize, but to joke. "Raath fleet claims to be invincible. Funny, I didn't know invincible ships exploded so easily on Titan. Maybe they should buy insurance." Her grin spread across every screen, every settlement. Laughter roared back in answer. But the Raath were learning. Their next strike was not on Earth, nor Mars, nor Titan. They targeted the hidden shipyards orbiting Saturn. If those fell, humanity's ability to build reinforcements would end. Ray knew she had to act. Gathering her war council, she laid out the plan, not to defend, not to delay, but to mock them directly in battle. "Let them bring their fleet," she told her commanders. "We'll show them the joke's on them." The plan was reckless. Insane. Very human. When the Raath armada approached Saturn, they were met not by resistance lines, but by a single human ship. Small, battered, a freighter barely holding together. It hailed the entire fleet on open channels. Ray herself appeared on their screens, leaning back in her chair, sipping from a mug. "Oh, you brought the whole family. How thoughtful. But tell me, did you practice your dramatic entrance, or do you always arrive late to the apocalypse?" The Raath commander snarled, ordering his fleet forward. But as they advanced, Saturn's rings lit up. Hidden within the ice and rock were thousands of mines, carefully disguised, waiting for this exact moment. The freighter accelerated away, its signal broadcasting one last taunt, "Catch me if you can." The Raath ships surged after it, plowing straight into the trap. Explosions cascaded like fireworks, lighting the void with shards of burning metal. Human warships emerged from the shadows, striking at their disoriented prey. For the first time, the Raath hesitated. For the first time, they realized the truth. Humans weren't merely resisting. They were enjoying it. The laughter echoed across calms as victory after victory unfolded. But Rain knew this was only the beginning. The Raath still had numbers. They still had firepower. And if they couldn't break humanity's spirit through humiliation, they would escalate to something far worse. And in the pit of her stomach, Ray felt it. The storm was only building. The Raath weren't just angry anymore. They were desperate. For them, war was never about resources, never about strategy. It was about dominance. Conquest was theater, designed to break spirits and bend civilizations to their knees. But humanity had denied them the performance. Instead of fear, they were met with mockery. Instead of pleas for mercy, they were drowned in laughter. And so, the Raath did what desperate tyrants always do, they escalated beyond reason. Ray was in the command spire of New Carthage when the first report came. A scout ship from the edge of the system had detected something vast approaching, larger than any warship, larger even than the Raath carriers. The feed crackled with static, but the image was unmistakable, a superweapon, a juggernaut forged in orbit of some faraway star. Its core radiated with stolen suns. Its weapons bristled like the teeth of a predator. The Raath called it the Devourer. When the name reached Ray's ears, she only smiled grimly. Well, she said, at least they're not being subtle. Merrick frowned beside her. That thing could level Earth in minutes. The fleet at Saturn barely dented their numbers. We can't laugh our way out of this one. Ray turned to him, eyes gleaming. Then we'll laugh as we charge into it. The plan was unthinkable. Every strategist in history would have called it suicide. But humans weren't playing by history's rules. If the Raath wanted submission, they'd get defiance on a scale that couldn't be ignored. Within hours, word spread across the system. Humanity would meet the Devourer head-on. No retreats. No hiding. Every colony, every settlement, every ship still intact would contribute. And the message carried Ray's voice. They think this ends with our silence. They think they can erase us. Let's show them the truth. When they fire their greatest weapon, when they send their gods of war, let's answer with laughter so loud it echoes into their nightmares. The call was answered. From Titan came the rail barges, patched and rearmed. From Europa, more drones than anyone thought remained. Mars offered fleets of retrofitted mining rigs. Even Earth itself, battered though it was, launched skywards in 1,000 jury-rigged craft. Humanity rose like a swarm, mismatched but united. And in the lead, Ray's flagship, the Ironclad. A vessel older than most stars, welded together from scavenged parts of 3 different centuries, its engines roared with reckless determination. Ray stood at its prow, Merrick and Yates flanking her, as the human armada surged into the void. They met the Raath near Jupiter, where storms raged eternal. The alien fleet stretched across the horizon, disciplined and terrifying. At its center loomed the Devourer, blotting out light, its weapons glowing with promise of annihilation. The Raath commander's voice boomed across channels, venom dripping with every word. Your defiance ends here. Kneel now, and perhaps a fragment of your species will survive in chains. Ray didn't mute the channel. She didn't even bother with diplomacy. Instead, she laughed. A sharp, fearless laugh that cut across the void. Then she raised a mug of coffee and saluted the monster of steel. Nice ship, she said, her grin wolfish. Shame it's about to be the most expensive bonfire in history. The human fleet erupted in laughter with her. The comms filled with jokes, taunts, songs. Miners banged on their hulls. Children shouted chants. Soldiers recited limericks mocking Raath mandibles. Against the backdrop of a fleet that could erase them in seconds, humanity answered with comedy. The Raath commander, furious, gave the order. The Devourer fired. A beam of light, wider than a city, carved through the void. It struck a human freighter, disintegrating it instantly. Then another. And another. Ships died like sparks before a storm. Thousands of lives extinguished in moments. But humanity didn't stop laughing. The survivors roared louder, mocking the Raath for wasting so much power on such small targets. One pilot even broadcast himself dancing as his ship spiraled into destruction, his last act a grin that haunted every Raath who saw it. Merrick gritted his teeth. We can't keep this up. That thing will burn us down to nothing. Ray's expression hardened. Then it's time for the punchline. The hidden trick lay not in their ships, nor their weapons, but in their willingness to risk everything. Humanity had spent centuries preparing not just for defense, but for spectacle. And as the Devourer fired again, Ray gave the signal. The mining rigs from Mars surged forward, not to fight, but to die. Each one was packed with volatile fuel, strapped with explosives, guided by pilots who laughed even as they sealed their fate. They dove into the beam itself, their death scattering its focus, destabilizing the weapon. Explosions rippled across the Juggernaut's hull. The Raath commander snarled. Fanatics! Madmen! But Yates, watching from the Ironclad's deck, whispered softly. No. Humans! Still, the weapon held. Crippled, sputtering, but alive. The Raath believed victory remained theirs. They tightened their formation, surrounding the human swarm. That was when Europa's drones arrived. Millions of them, tiny and insignificant, swarming like locusts. They weren't strong enough to pierce hulls, not on their own. But together they blanketed the Raath fleet, jamming sensors, clogging vents, burrowing into seams. Ships faltered, colliding with one another, blinded by the storm. The battlefield became chaos. Human laughter mixed with alien roars as explosions lit Jupiter's shadow. But still, the Devourer loomed, refusing to fall. Ray stood at the command console, staring at the behemoth. She knew the truth now: nothing short of a direct strike at its heart would destroy it. And that meant suicide. She turned to Merrick. "Prepare the ironclad." His eyes widened. "You can't mean—" "I do. This ship was built to die gloriously. And I can't think of a better stage than this." The crew heard her words. None flinched. Some even laughed. They'd followed Ray because she embodied what it meant to be human, not survival at all costs, but defiance to the end. If this was how they went out, so be it. Yates placed a hand on her shoulder. "History will remember this." Ray smirked. "History better laugh at this." The ironclad turned, engines blazing brighter than they ever had, and surged toward the Devourer. Raath fire hammered its hull, tearing chunks away, but still it pressed on. Ray opened every comm channel, broadcasting her voice to friend and foe alike. "You wanted us to kneel? Here's our answer." She and her crew laughed, wild, unstoppable laughter that filled the stars. Then the ironclad struck. The collision ripped through the Devourer's hull. Explosions chained across its body, fire blossoming in waves. Systems overloaded, reactors breached. For the first time, the Raath's pride, their indestructible godship, screamed as it began to die. The human fleet roared in triumph, their laughter turning to cheers, songs, and tears. The Raath fleet staggered, their discipline shattering. Some tried to retreat. Others froze in shock. But Ray wasn't finished. As the ironclad broke apart, her final transmission cut through the void. "Tell your kind, after 1,000 years of silence, you thought we'd forgotten how to fight. But we've been practicing how to laugh. And laughter, Raath, is the sound of your defeat." Then the transmission ended, the ship consumed in fire. For a heartbeat, the battlefield went still. Then, impossibly, human laughter returned, echoing from survivors, from colonies watching across the system, from every corner of a species that refused to bow. The Raath had unleashed their god of war. Humanity had answered with a punchline. And in that moment, the galaxy itself seemed to tremble. The fireball that consumed the Devourer lit Jupiter's storms like a second sun. For minutes, no one spoke, either Raath nor human. The void was filled with wreckage, debris scattering like fireworks across space. The Juggernaut was dead. And with it, so was Ray Halvorsen, commander of the Ironclad. Or so the Raath believed. The human fleet, battered and broken, still held formation. Miners in their jury-rigged barges, colonists in retrofitted freighters, children in training craft, they all aligned behind the memory of Ray's last laugh. Across open channels, her words replayed on loop. "Laughter, Raath, is the sound of your defeat." The Raath tried to rally. Their commander snarled orders, his pride refusing to die with his weapon. But discipline faltered. Their soldiers had never seen the Devourer fall. To them, it was God incarnate. Gods did not bleed, did not burn. Yet it had. And by the hands of the very species they had dismissed as feral children. Fear spread through their ranks like infection. Merrick, left in command after Ray's sacrifice, saw it instantly. He leaned into his comms, voice sharp but tinged with something Ray herself would have approved of, mockery. "Look at them! The mighty Raath, scared of miners and farmers! Afraid of laughter! Afraid of us!" The humans answered with cheers. Someone from Titan shouted across comms, "Did you see their godship pop like a firecracker?" Another chimed in, "I'll drink to that." Soon the channels were chaos, jokes, songs, laughter drowning out Raath commands. The Raath fired again, but their aim was scattered, their focus broken. Yates, his old hands trembling on the console, whispered as if to himself, "They can't understand it. To them, laughter is insanity. But to us, It's survival. Then, louder, to the fleet. Do not stop laughing. Make them believe we are not afraid of anything, not even death itself. So the humans laughed. Even as more ships burned, even as hulls split and oxygen hissed into vacuum, their last sounds were joy. Raath comms, hacked and rebroadcast, carried human voices into every alien ear, jokes about mandibles, songs about terrible alien hygiene, insults so absurd they bordered on poetry. The effect was devastating. The Raath broke. Some ships turned and fled. Others fired wildly, hitting their own. The mighty war host, once a blade of order, dissolved into chaos. Humanity pressed the attack with everything left: rail barrages, drone swarms, suicide runs. And then came the twist Ray had planned all along. The ironclad's wreckage, drifting near the remains of the Devourer, suddenly flared with light. Not destroyed, at least, not completely. Ray's last gamble had not been simple collision. Hidden in the ship's belly was a payload, a device crafted from Europa's experimental tech, Titan's mining cores, and Earth's last reactors. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. The device ignited, broadcasting across every frequency the Raath used. Not words. Not threats. But laughter, Ray's laughter, recorded before the charge. Wild, fearless, endless. It echoed through every Raath ship, bypassing their defenses, saturating their systems. To them, it sounded like madness infecting their very cores. They panicked. Entire squadrons ejected their reactors, fearing corruption. Others turned weapons on themselves, desperate to silence the sound. A few ships rammed each other in blind frenzy. The human fleet, watching in awe, realized what Ray had done. She had turned laughter into a weapon. Not one that destroyed bodies, but one that shattered will. By the time silence returned, the Raath fleet was in ruins. A handful of survivors fled into the void, their formation broken, their pride crushed. Humanity had no strength left to pursue, but they didn't need to. The message was clear. Do not come back. Ever. The battlefield hung in eerie quiet, only the crackle of burning debris and the soft hum of damaged engines filling the void. Then, as if on cue, a single voice broke through the comms. So, who's buying the first round? The fleet erupted. Cheers, laughter, songs, tears, it all bled together into a sound the galaxy hadn't heard in 1,000 years. The unbroken spirit of humanity. Merrick, exhausted but alive, allowed himself a crooked grin. Commander Ray Halvorsen, he muttered, looking toward the wreckage. You madwoman. You did it. Yates stood beside him, tears streaming down his weathered face. History won't call this a victory of ships or weapons. It will call it the day laughter saved humanity. In the weeks that followed, humanity rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but always with jokes on their lips. Settlers carved statues not of soldiers, but of laughing faces. Songs were written about the ironclad, not as a martyr, but as the galaxy's greatest prankster. Children painted stars with crooked grins, declaring space belonged not to tyrants, but to the joyful. And the Raath? Their empire trembled. Word of the defeat spread faster than any fleet could travel. Other species, those long cowed under Raath domination, heard whispers of humans who laughed in the face of death, who toppled gods with jokes. Rebellion sparked. Chains broke. The Raath High Council met in fury, their debates filled with shame. Some argued to return and finish the job. But none could agree, for fear lingered in their mandibles. What if the humans laughed again? On Earth, Merrick walked the rebuilt streets of New Carthage. Children ran past, playing games where one pretended to be a Raath, and the others defeated him not with weapons, but with laughter. Markets buzzed with energy. Old songs gained new verses. He stopped at the memorial of the ironclad, where Yates was already waiting, hands folded. The old historian glanced at him. I've been thinking, Merrick. For centuries, we feared the Raath's return. We thought we'd need weapons of unimaginable power. But in the end, all we needed was the courage to laugh. Merrick smirked. And one very reckless commander. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Merrick added softly, "Do you think they'll come back?" Yates shook his head. "Not soon. Not after this. They won't risk facing the species that finds comedy in annihilation. To them, we are mad. To us, we are free." The two men laughed, not forced, not defiant this time, but warm, genuine laughter. Around them, the city echoed with it. Above, in the vast black of space, Ray's final signal still drifted, an echo, bouncing between the stars. Laughter that no silence could erase. For 1,000 years, humanity had been forgotten. For 1,000 years, the galaxy had believed them exiled, quiet, broken. Now every species knew the truth: humans had not grown weaker. They had sharpened themselves into something terrifying. Something unstoppable. And when the universe asked how they endured, how they fought gods and won, the answer would always be the same. We laughed.